I stared at my phone at 2 in the morning, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The number on my screen couldn't be real. My savings account, the one I'd been building for 10 years to open a bakery called Sugarline, showed $0. Nothing. Empty. Gone. The withdrawal was authorized by one person. Violet Hartley, my best friend since we were both 8 years old. I sat there in the darkness of my bedroom, unable to breathe. 10 years of work. 12-hour shifts. Skipped vacations. Extra jobs on weekends. All of it disappeared in a single transaction. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, something cold settled into my chest, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. I drove to Violet's house in my old Honda, arriving at 3 in the morning. I could see lights on inside, so I walked directly to her back door. Through the window, I saw her laughing, champagne flute in hand, celebrating with her husband Marcus. To new beginnings, Marcus was saying, raising his glass. I watched them for 30 seconds and then I knocked. When Violet opened the door and saw me, her face went white. I simply smiled, the same smile I'd given her 1,000 times before, and said, "Hey, what are you celebrating?" She stumbled over her words. "Oh, just a work thing. Nothing big." I nodded slowly, still smiling, and then I said the most important thing I would say for the next 6 months. "Well, congratulations." I drove home in complete silence. No music. No crying. Just me and the cold knowledge that my best friend had stolen everything from me. And she had no idea that I knew. She had no idea what was coming. My name is Mara Quinn, and this is the story of how I caught my best friend stealing my life, and how I took it all back. My name is Mara Quinn. I'm 28 years old, and I've been a pastry chef for 7 years. But before I became a chef, I was just a girl who loved baking. Before that, I was the girl who made birthday cakes in her parents' kitchen while Violet sat at the counter, stealing frosting with her fingers and making me laugh until I cried. We met in 3rd grade when Violet's family moved in 3 doors down from mine. She had pink ribbons in her hair and the biggest smile I'd ever seen. I had just lost my dog the week before, and I was still sad about everything. Violet took my hand at recess and said, "Do you want to be my best friend forever?" I said yes immediately, and that was it. For 20 years, Violet Hartley was my person. She was there when my mom got sick. She was there when my mom passed away 5 years ago. She held me while I fell apart at the funeral and didn't leave my side for an entire week. After my mom died, my life fell apart financially. The medical bills were enormous. I was working as a line cook, barely making ends meet. Violet offered to help me manage my money. She suggested we open a joint savings account for my dream, my bakery. "I'll keep you on track," she promised. "You're too emotional about money, Mara. Let me help." At the time it seemed like love. It seemed like the most generous thing anyone had ever offered me. I gave her power of attorney over my savings account because I trusted her completely. She was my best friend. She was my sister. Or so I thought. For the past 5 years I'd been saving every penny. I worked double shifts. I skipped buying new clothes. I ate cheap food. I put every dollar into that account. And Violet helped me track it all, celebrating each milestone with me. $5,000. $10,000. $20,000. By last year we'd hit $50,000. Just one more year, I told her. One more year and I could finally open Sugarline. I'd already designed the logo. I'd already chosen the location. I'd already picked out the equipment. Everything was planned. And then last month, Violet said she wanted to open a joint account with me, to keep things organized. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes. I never imagined she was planning to steal from me the entire time. After I left Violet's house that night, I drove around the city for hours. My first instinct was to call the police. My second instinct was to scream at her until she understood what she'd done. But as I drove, my brain started working logically, and I realized something terrifying. I was completely alone in this. Violet's husband, Marcus, was a lawyer. A very good lawyer. They had money and connections and influence. My mom used to say, "The person with the better story wins, Mara. Not the person with the truth." I had the truth. But Violet had the resources, the reputation, and the network to make me look like a liar. If I went to the police now, it would be my word against hers. I'd given her power of attorney. I put her on the account. On paper it all looked legal. My hands were shaking as I realized the depth of her betrayal. She hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen it in a way that would make it almost impossible to prove. So I made a decision that morning as the sun was rising. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. I was going to stay quiet and watch. I was going to find out exactly what she'd done and why. I was going to gather evidence that even a lawyer couldn't argue with. I drove home and deleted the banking alert from my phone. Not the alert. I screenshotted it first and uploaded it to a private email account I created that morning. Then I showered and dressed like nothing had happened. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I barely recognized the person looking back. My eyes are different now. Colder. More focused. I texted Violet. "Hey, how are you today?" She responded within seconds. "Great. Wanna grab coffee later?" Perfect. She had no idea I knew. She probably thought I'd check the account maybe next week. She probably thought she had time. But she didn't know that I'd been checking my balance at 2 in the morning. She didn't know I was about to become a completely different person. At the coffee shop, Violet was glowing. She wore a new designer purse I'd never seen before. Probably bought with my money. She had her nails done. She was wearing my grandmother's necklace, the one she'd borrowed last month and promised to return. The rage I felt was so physical it hurt. It made my chest tight and my vision blur at the edges. But I smiled and ordered a latte. Violet talked about a friend who'd made bad investments, and how that friend was probably going to lose everything. She was mocking me. Directly, cruelly, mocking me while wearing my dead grandmother's necklace. When she posted a photo online that afternoon, the necklace visible in the frame, the caption read, "Finally funding my lifelong dream project." Sometimes you just have to take charge of your own destiny. I saved that post. I screenshotted it. I noted the time and date. Every smile she gave me felt like a knife, and every lie she told felt carefully chosen to hurt. That's when I realized something crucial. Violet wasn't stealing from me because she was desperate. She was stealing because she could. She was stealing because she decided I didn't deserve my own dream as much as she wanted hers. She was stealing because she'd convinced herself that taking my money was justified somehow. She was stealing because she believed she could get away with it. And she almost had. But not anymore. I went home and bought a small notebook that looked like a recipe book. Inside, I started documenting everything. Times, dates, conversations, locations, screenshots. I created a fake email address and uploaded every piece of evidence I found. I set up secure cloud backups that only I could access. I was going to build a case so solid that no lawyer in the world could argue with it. And I was going to do it all while Violet smiled at me and called me her best friend. 2 weeks after I discovered the theft, Violet invited me to her house for dinner. Marcus was working late, so it was just the two of us. I watched her pour wine and laugh about her day at work. I watched her use the stove my mom had left me in her will, the expensive one that I'd left at her house years ago when I was traveling. She was using all my things now. Somehow the betrayal extended to everything. During dinner, I casually asked her about taxes and finances. I told her I was worried about my accounting and asked if she'd help me organize my documents. "Of course," she said immediately. "That's what best friends do." She pulled up her laptop and logged into an old shared folder we'd created years ago for household budgeting. I watched over her shoulder, my phone in my lap, recording audio. I didn't need to record her confessing. I just needed to gather financial documents. In that folder I found it: proof, multiple withdrawals, multiple transfers to a shell company registered under a fake business name. The amounts, dates, and recipient accounts were all clearly documented. She'd been so careful with the actual transactions, but she'd been careless with the digital trail. I took photos of everything with my phone, making sure the dates were visible. My hands were steady the entire time. The shaking had stopped. I'd moved past anger into something colder and more dangerous: clarity. That night, I sent everything to my private email with a subject line that looked innocent: cookie recipe number 12. I made sure to bury it among dozens of other emails with similar subject lines. I was building a fort of evidence that would be impossible to ignore. And I was doing it all while my best friend of 20 years thought I was still her loyal friend. After I left Violet's house, I couldn't ignore something I'd been noticing for a while. My fiancé Caleb had been acting strange. He avoided talking about money. He changed the subject whenever Violet came up. He was staying out late. He was distant at night. A horrible thought started growing in my mind, and I tried to push it away. But then one night I found a text on his laptop that he'd left open. It was from Violet. "Can't wait to see you again." The contact name was just her first name. Nothing that would seem suspicious if anyone checked. But the timestamp was from the middle of a work day, and Caleb had told me he was working late at the office that day. I closed the laptop slowly. My heart was pounding. I couldn't breathe. I sat there for an hour staring at the wall. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to ask him directly. That's what weak people did. Weak people confronted. Weak people cried and begged for explanations. I was going to find out the truth and document it. I started paying attention to patterns. Caleb left the house on Thursdays at 6 p.m. He said he was going to the gym. He returned at 8:30, sweaty and tired. Except his gym bag was always dry. His hair was always slightly damp in the wrong way. And his cologne was different, fresher. On the fourth Thursday I followed him. I drove behind his car as he pulled into a hotel parking lot downtown. I waited in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. 20 minutes later, Violet pulled into the same lot. I watched her walk into the hotel. I watched my fiancé emerge from the lobby and meet her in the hallway. I watched them go upstairs together. I sat in my car and recorded the video on my phone, capturing the timestamp, the license plates, everything. Then I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just added another layer to my list of betrayals. First my best friend. Now my fiancé. Now I had two people to hold accountable. I collapsed in my car outside my apartment, alone in the parking garage, and finally allowed myself to break. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe. I let out every scream I'd been holding back. I let the rage and pain and betrayal pour out of me until there was nothing left. And then when it was over, I sat there in silence and made a decision. I could call Marcus right now and tell him about his wife. I could tell him everything I'd discovered. I could blow up their marriage. But I realized something in that moment. Marcus might not know, but Violet had dragged him into this too. She'd stolen money from our joint account and likely used it for her affair. He was a victim too, even if he didn't know it yet. I was going to handle this carefully. I was going to stay calm and I was going to be strategic. I was going to become someone that Violet had never seen before. Someone cold enough to plan her destruction methodically. I drove to my apartment and took a long shower. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. My eyes are different now. Colder. I was different now. I went to my closet and pulled out a small notebook I'd bought at the store. On the front, I'd written a simple recipe. Chocolate chip cookies. Inside I started writing everything down. Every text message. Every date. Every location. Every transaction. I created a timeline. I made notes. I documented everything with the precision of a scientist. I wasn't being emotional about this anymore. I was being methodical. I was treating this like a case study, and I was going to win. That night I did something else. I installed a small security camera in my living room. It was disguised as a clock. It recorded audio and video and uploaded everything to a secure cloud. Violet visited my apartment at least twice a week. I wanted to make sure I captured everything she said when she was here with me. The camera worked perfectly. On Violet's next visit, 3 days later, she sat on my couch and talked about her new business venture. "I'm thinking about opening something," she said casually, sipping coffee. "Like a bakery or something. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur." I smiled and asked her questions. I acted interested. I played the role of best friend perfectly. But my camera was recording every word. After she left, I watched the footage again. Violet had said something that made my blood go cold. "You know, Mara is so emotional about her money. She'd never survive in the business world. She needs someone like me to take charge." That's what best friends do. She actually believed that. She actually believed she was helping me by stealing from me. She actually believed she was the hero of this story. A week later, Violet arrived at my apartment drunk. It was a Friday night, and Marcus was out with his friends. She'd apparently driven to my place directly from a bar. She collapsed on my couch and started talking. My camera was recording. I got my first investor's money today, she slurred, laughing. So easy. I just told them it was my idea. They never even questioned it. She hiccuped. You know what the best part is? Mara trusted me with her banking password. Her password, Mara. Can you believe that? She laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. She's so stupid. So naive. She'll never even know it's gone. I'll tell her. I'll tell her I invested it wrong or something, and she'll just believe me because she's weak and emotional and she needs me. I watched the footage that night, and I felt something I'd never felt before. I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just cold, clear certainty. Violet had said everything out loud that I needed to hear. She'd confessed to everything. And my camera had captured every word. I was going to use this. I was going to use it all. 2 weeks later, Violet announced her new business on social media. Sugarline by Violet Hartley. The exact name I'd been planning to use. The same logo I designed 3 years ago. The same color scheme I'd chosen. The same vision I'd spent 10 years dreaming about. She'd stolen that too. In her announcement she wrote, "Finally pursuing my lifelong passion. Sugarline will be the premier artisan bakery in the city. Can't wait to share this journey with you all." The comments flooded in immediately. People are congratulating her. People saying how inspired they were. People asked when the grand opening was. All of them had no idea that every single part of this business was stolen directly from me. I attended the launch party on opening day. I wore a blue dress and smiled at everyone. I congratulated Violet and told her how happy I was for her. I watched her accept compliments that belonged to me. I watched her stand in front of a bakery case filled with pastries that I designed. I watched her take credit for 10 years of my work and dreams. And I memorized everything. The suppliers. The investors. The staff. The menu. The layout. The business model. I was going to need all of it. During the party, one of the investors, a man named Derek, pulled Violet aside and said, "You know, this is an incredible concept. Where did you get the idea?" And I watched Violet lie. She told him it came to her one day. That it was her passion. That she'd been dreaming about it for years. She even said, and I will never forget this. "My friend Mara, she was supposed to do something like this, but she wasn't brave enough. I decided to do it myself." I stood there with my champagne and I smiled. She just admitted, on video recorded by the camera I'd hidden in my purse, that she'd stolen the idea from me. She'd just told an investor that I was the originator of this business, and then she'd taken credit for it herself. She'd handed me exactly what I needed. For the next month, I continued my careful documentation. I attended Violet's bakery regularly. I acted like a proud friend. I took photos with her for social media. I helped her with minor tasks. I was the perfect best friend. But every moment I was there, I was gathering information. I learned that her startup capital came directly from my stolen savings. I learned that she'd use false documentation to convince investors she had business experience she didn't actually have. I learned that she was planning to trademark the Sugarline name and logo. I learned everything. Meanwhile, I started laying groundwork for my own plan. I opened a brand new bank account at a different bank under my full legal name. I began saving money from my job as a pastry chef at another bakery. It was slow. It was painful. But it was mine. I also created a new business entity, Sugarline LLC, registered in my name. Not as an owner of Violet's business. As a completely separate company. I hired a lawyer, not Marcus obviously, to help me file the proper paperwork. He looked at the evidence I'd gathered and said, "This is fraud. Clear-cut fraud. Embezzlement. Identity misuse. You have a very strong case." I paid him in cash and asked him to keep detailed records of everything. I also did something else. I reached out to an old friend from college, Diana, who was now an investigative journalist. I didn't tell her the full story. I just asked if she'd be interested in a story about startup fraud and business theft. She said yes immediately. "People love stories about stolen ideas," she told me over coffee. "Send me what you have." I haven't sent her anything yet. But I told her I would. I was building everything perfectly. Each piece fits together like a puzzle. And I was the only one who could see the whole picture. 3 months into Violet's business, she became a minor celebrity. Local magazines featured her. Newspapers wrote about her. She did interviews about empowering women entrepreneurs and following your dreams. She was becoming the face of Sugarline, and the world was applauding her for it. The worst part was that most of it was true. The bakery was beautiful. The pastries were good. The business model worked. But it was all built on my stolen money and my stolen ideas. And nobody knew. I kept quiet. I kept smiling. I kept attending her events. And I kept documenting everything. Caleb, meanwhile, had become increasingly distant. I don't think he even realized I knew about his affair with Violet. He probably thought I was just emotional and distant because I was stressed about my life. He was sleeping in the guest room now. He was barely speaking to me. But I didn't confront him. I let him think I didn't know. I let him think our relationship was just naturally falling apart. In reality, I was collecting evidence. I was documenting his late-night absences. I was keeping receipts from his credit card that showed hotel charges. I was building a case that would hold up in court. One day, Caleb tried to talk to me about our relationship. "I think we should see a counselor," he said. "I think we're drifting apart." I looked at him and said, "You're right. We are. But there's nothing a counselor can fix." He looked confused, but he didn't push it. He just accepted it. He thought I was giving up. He had no idea I was preparing to end things on my terms, not his. And he had no idea that when I did, I had the documentation to make sure he got nothing from me. Around the same time, I started getting closer to Marcus, Violet's husband. I would text him articles about business and ask his opinion. I would run into him accidentally at the coffee shop and chat with him about his work. I wasn't flirting with him. I was building an alliance. I needed him to trust me, because soon I was going to need him on my side. 5 months after discovering the theft, I reached out to Marcus privately. We met at a quiet coffee shop away from Violet. I didn't tell him everything at first. I just said, "Marcus, I think something might be wrong with Violet's finances. Have you noticed anything unusual?" He looked uncomfortable. "Actually, yes. I've been seeing some discrepancies. There are transfers I don't understand. Bank accounts I've never heard of." I thought maybe I was overreacting, but he trailed off. "What if I told you that Violet stole money from me?" I said quietly. "What if I told you that money was used to fund her bakery?" His face went very still. I showed him my documentation. I showed him the evidence. I showed him the video of Violet saying she stole from me. I showed him the screenshots of the transactions. I showed him everything. By the end, he looked like he might be sick. "My God," he said. "Mara, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "I know," I said. "But I need your help. Will you work with me?" He nodded immediately. He was a lawyer. He understood what needed to happen. He understood that we had a case. And more importantly, he understood that his wife had betrayed him too. We spent the next 2 weeks gathering more evidence together. He pulled financial records. He found additional hidden accounts. He discovered that Violet had been planning to take out significant loans against their house without his knowledge. She'd been planning to build an empire with my money and his assets. The scope of her deception was enormous. And Marcus was furious. Not just with Violet, but with himself for not seeing it sooner. 6 months after I discovered the theft, I decided it was time to move to the next phase. I had my lawyer send an anonymous tip to the city's business licensing board about potential fraud at Sugarline. At the same time, I reached out to Diana, my journalist friend, and sent her the entire file of evidence. I didn't tell her my name in the first message. I just sent her everything. She called me within an hour. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Someone who knows Violet Hartley," I said. "Someone who can prove she's a fraud. Can you help me tell the truth?" Diana agreed to investigate. She told me she'd reach out to business owners who'd worked with Violet. She'd examine the financial records. She'd talk to her investors. She said, "If what you're telling me is true, this is massive." "It's true," I said. "And I have proof." Meanwhile, I did something bold. I registered the domain name sugarlinetheralstory.com, and I created a simple website. On it, I posted my original designs. My original business plan. Dated documents showing when I'd created them. My name. My story. Told simply and honestly. I didn't attack Violet. I just told the truth. Within 48 hours, the website had 5,000 visitors. People were starting to ask questions. People who'd worked with Violet were reaching out to me directly, asking if the story was true, and I confirmed it. I didn't attack her. I just confirmed the truth. Violet started to panic. She called me crying, saying she'd received a visit from a business licensing inspector. She said she'd gotten emails from journalists asking about her business history. She said investors were pulling out. She thought I might know something. "Mara, have you heard anything?" she asked desperately. "Not really," I said. "But it sounds like people are just asking questions about your background. Have you been honest about everything?" She hung up without answering. The dominoes were falling now, faster than I'd anticipated. A government audit letter arrived at Violet's bakery. The investigators traced her startup funding back to my stolen savings. They found the shell company. They found the wire transfers. They found everything. Diana published her article, How One Woman Stole Her Best Friend's Dreams and Got Away with It, until she didn't. The article was thorough, detailed, and devastating. She quoted me directly. She showed my designs. She showed Violet's businesses. She showed the timeline. She showed how Violet had stolen 10 years of work and 20 years of friendship. The article went viral. By the end of the day, it had 50,000 views. News outlets picked it up. Radio stations were talking about it. And Violet's name was everywhere. But not in the way she wanted. Marcus had officially separated from her and hired a divorce attorney. He was cooperating fully with investigators. Caleb had disappeared. One day he just packed a bag and left. I found a note saying he was sorry and that he couldn't face me. I didn't care. I had what I needed from him. And then I did it. I turned myself in. Not as a criminal but as a victim reporting a crime. I went to the police station with my lawyer and Marcus, and I filed an official complaint against Violet Hartley for theft, embezzlement, and fraud. I handed over every piece of evidence. I testified about everything. And I asked for restitution and intellectual property protection. The detective took all my files and then he looked at me and said, "This is one of the most organized fraud cases I've ever seen. You documented everything perfectly." "I know," I said. I wanted to make sure no one could argue with the truth. On the same day I filed the police report, I did something final. I officially registered Sugar Line LLC with the state. The real Sugar Line. My Sugar Line. I trademarked the name and logo in my name. I secured the rights to all my original designs. I did everything legally and officially. Violet's lawyers tried to fight it, but they couldn't. The designs predated her business by years. The documentation was irrefutable. The law was on my side. Violet was arrested 3 days later at her bakery. Police let her out in front of her employees and customers. The news cameras captured the entire thing. She was charged with fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The case was open and shut. She'd confessed on video. She'd left a paper trail. She'd admitted her guilt to multiple people. Within 2 weeks, she took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to all charges and agreed to full restitution. She would pay back every dollar she'd stolen from me. She would pay back every dollar she'd stolen from the government through false business claims. She would pay back everything. The judge ordered her to pay me $90,000, my original $50,000 plus interest and damages. The judge ordered her to pay the government an additional $30,000 in fines. The judge ordered her to pay Marcus half the value of their house in the divorce settlement. And the judge placed her on probation for 5 years. She lost her business. She lost her freedom of movement. She lost her reputation. She lost everything. When the judge announced the verdict, I sat in the courtroom completely still. And I realized something. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty. Empty and tired and sad. This person I'd loved for 20 years had become someone I didn't recognize. And I'd had to become someone I didn't recognize too. But I had one. And that was all that mattered. The day after the verdict, I received the restitution check. $90,000. My stolen money was back in my account. And something inside me shifted. I could finally move forward. I met with my lawyer and told him my next step. I was going to open Sugar Line. The real one. The one I'd been dreaming about for 10 years. The one that was actually mine. I'd saved enough money from my job to cover equipment and initial supplies. Combined with the restitution, I would have enough to open a beautiful bakery. A real bakery. My bakery. I found a location, a bright, warm corner space with tall windows and good light. The space had been empty for months, and the landlord was eager to rent to me. I signed the lease in my own name. I designed the interior myself. I chose warm colors. I chose wood and plants. I chose to make it beautiful and welcoming. And then I started baking. I created the pastries I've been perfecting for 10 years. I developed the recipes. I trained employees who actually cared about the craft. I built something real and authentic and completely mine. Violet's old bakery closed 2 months later. No one wanted to eat there anymore. No one wanted to associate with her. The location sat empty, and then it was repossessed by the bank. One morning, a delivery truck showed up at my new bakery with a load of equipment. I signed the paperwork and I realized what it was. Violet's old bakery sign and logo signage, repossessed by the bank. I had them take it around back. I didn't need to see it. I didn't need to think about it anymore. Sugar Line by Mara Quinn opened on a sunny Saturday morning. The line wrapped around the block. News reporters came. Diana wrote a follow-up article about my opening. People came because they wanted to support the real Mara Quinn. They came because they wanted to buy from someone who'd been wronged and had fought back. They came because the pastries were extraordinary. By the end of the first day, I'd sold out completely. I sat in the empty bakery that night, surrounded by the smell of flour and butter and sugar, and I allowed myself to feel proud. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. Not with stolen money. Not with someone else's support. But with my own hands and my own vision and my own resilience. I'd survived betrayal. I'd survived heartbreak. I'd survived deception. And I'd come out the other side stronger. 3 months after my bakery opened, Violet was released from temporary custody to begin her probation. She tried to contact me multiple times. She sent letters apologizing. She sent her family to ask me to forgive her. She posted on social media about how sorry she was. But I never responded. There was nothing she could say that would matter. She'd made her choice and I'd made mine. One afternoon she actually showed up at my bakery. She looked broken. Her hair was different. Her clothes were worn. The confidence was completely gone. She walked up to me at the counter and she started to speak. Mara, I held up my hand. You did this to yourself, I said quietly. I loved you for 20 years. I trusted you with everything. And you chose to betray me. You chose to steal from me. You chose to lie to me. Every single day you had the opportunity to tell me the truth. Every single day you could have asked for help instead of stealing. Every single day you chose wrong. And I watched you choose wrong. I documented you choosing wrong. And then I made sure the world knew you'd chosen wrong. That wasn't me being cruel. That was me being honest. She started to cry. I was sick, Mara. I was having some kind of breakdown. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, I said. You were thinking very clearly. You were thinking about what you wanted and you decided you wanted it more than you wanted our friendship. That's not a breakdown. That's just who you are. She left without another word. I never saw her again. News came to me much later that she'd moved to another state. She'd gotten a job at a small accounting firm. She was rebuilding her life quietly. And I was glad. Not because I wanted her to succeed, but because I wanted her to live with the consequences of her actions forever. That was the real punishment. Not jail time. Not fines. But the knowledge that she destroyed something real and could never get it back. Some things once broken can't be repaired. And that's what Violet would have to live with for the rest of her life. A year after opening Sugar Line, I was approached by a publisher. They wanted me to write a book about my experience. First I said no. The story felt too raw. Felt too personal. But then I thought about all the people who'd reached out to me after Diana's article. People who'd been betrayed by friends. People who'd been stolen from. People who felt powerless. And I realized that my story could help them. I started writing. I wrote about friendship. I wrote about the betrayal. I wrote about the documentation and planning. I wrote about the court case. And I wrote about the aftermath. I wrote honestly about how angry I was. How betrayed I felt. How long it took me to heal. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I didn't make myself into a perfect hero. I just told the truth. The book came out a year later. It was called The Cost of Silence: How I Caught My Best Friend Stealing My Life. Within the first month it sold 10,000 copies. Within 3 months 50,000. It hit bestseller lists. People read my story and recognized their own pain in it. I started receiving messages from readers thanking me for telling my truth. Some of them were inspired to report their own cases of fraud. Some of them found the courage to confront people who'd betrayed them. Some of them just felt less alone. And I realized that my pain had meaning. It had been transformed into something that could help others. 2 years after the fraud case was resolved, I closed my eyes one night and realized something extraordinary. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had sustained me for so long had finally faded. I didn't think about Violet every day. I didn't check on her social media. I didn't wonder about her life. I'd finally let her go. My bakery was thriving. I had a team of 15 employees who cared about the work. I had regular customers who came in every morning. I'd expanded to a second location. I was making plans for a third. I was healthy. I was happy. I was building something that was genuinely mine, and nobody could take it away. One morning I stood in my bakery and looked around at everything I'd created. The warm lighting, the comfortable seating, the smell of fresh bread and pastries. The customers were laughing and talking with each other. The employees I trained who treated this space like their own. This was a success. Not revenge. Success. Real lasting earned success. And it felt so much better than I'd ever imagined. I started dating again a year after Caleb left. His name was James and he was an elementary school teacher. He was kind and steady and completely honest. He knew my entire story before we even went on a first date. He'd read the book. He'd followed the case. And he still wanted to know me. On our first date he said, "You went through something terrible and you came out the other side whole. That's not just strong. That's extraordinary." We took things slowly. We built trust carefully. And a year into our relationship he proposed. He did it in my bakery after closing time, surrounded by flour dust and the smell of vanilla. I said yes. And this time I didn't sign a joint account with him. I didn't give him power of attorney. I didn't blindly trust him with my financial security. I loved him, but I also protected myself. I learned that those two things aren't contradictory. You can love someone and still maintain boundaries. You can trust someone and still verify their trustworthiness. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, and I would never forget it. 3 years after the verdict, I was invited to speak at a business conference about fraud prevention and entrepreneurship. The organizers wanted me to share my story with other business owners and employees. I was nervous about it. Public speaking had never been my strength. But I remembered all the messages I'd received from readers, and I knew I had to do it. I stood on that stage in front of 300 people, and I told them everything. I told them about Violet. I told them about the betrayal. I told them about the documentation. I told them about the court case. And I told them about healing. I told them that the most important thing you can do when someone betrays you is to document it. Keep records. Take screenshots. Save receipts. Create a timeline. Make sure the truth can't be denied. I told them that silence might feel safer, but it's actually more dangerous. By staying quiet, you're allowing the betrayal to continue. By speaking up, you're protecting yourself and potentially protecting others. The response was overwhelming. Business owners told me they'd implemented new financial safeguards in their companies. Employees told me they'd reported fraud they'd been too afraid to report before. People told me my story had changed their lives. And I realized that my pain had been transformed into purpose. I'd turned my greatest betrayal into my most important contribution. A year before my second wedding, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went to see Violet. She was living in a small apartment in another state, working as an accountant for a mid-sized firm. She'd rebuilt her life quietly, away from the spotlight. When she opened her door and saw me, her face went white. "Mara? What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," I said. We sat in her living room, and for the first time since the bakery opening, we had a real conversation. Not angry, not confrontational, just honest. I told her that I'd healed. I told her that I'd built a successful business. I told her that I was getting married. I told her that I'd written a book and spoken to thousands of people about her betrayal. And I told her that I'd forgiven her. Not because she deserved it, but because holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting her to die. She cried the entire time. She told me about her life now, about the shame she carried, about the people who still wouldn't speak to her because of what she'd done, about the job she had that paid half what she used to make, about the fact that she'd never gotten married again, about the fact that nobody would hire her for better positions because they could find my book and the court case online. She told me that every single day, she lived with the consequences of her choices. And I believed her. I didn't absolve her. I didn't tell her everything was fine. But I told her that I hoped she would continue to build a good life. And I hoped she would never do this to anyone else again. And then I left. I didn't keep in touch. I didn't maintain a friendship. But I'd given her something she didn't deserve. The knowledge that I'd moved on completely. That was my final gift to her. My freedom. On my wedding day, I stood in a small stone chapel with my mother's locket around my neck. James was waiting at the altar in a simple gray suit. Our friends were in the pews, smiling and ready to celebrate. And I thought about how different this day was from what I'd imagined when I was engaged to Caleb. This wasn't about trust given blindly. This was about trust earned carefully. This wasn't about surrendering my independence. This was about choosing to build something together while maintaining myself. As I walked down the aisle, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never let anyone steal my dreams again. I would never let anyone take me for granted again. I would never let silence protect a liar again. And I would build a life so full and authentic and genuinely mine that no one could ever make me feel like I belonged to them. James slipped a ring on my finger and I slipped one on his. We promised to love each other honestly. We promised to protect each other. We promised to be faithful and true. And I meant every word. Not because I was naive, but because I'd learned what it meant to promise and keep that promise. We danced at our reception in the ballroom, surrounded by people I'd chosen to trust. Real friends. Good people. People who'd proven themselves worthy of my loyalty. And I realized something profound. My friendships had changed. The people in my life now weren't there out of habit. They were there because we'd built real connection. They were there because we'd earned each other's trust through consistency and honesty and care. That was the real gift of my experience. Not revenge. Not vindication. But the ability to see people clearly and choose my circle wisely. 5 years after I'd discovered the empty bank account, I stood in the grand opening of my third Sugar Line location. This one was bigger than the others. It had a teaching kitchen where I taught classes in pastry arts and entrepreneurship. It had a sitting area with a library of business books and fraud prevention guides. It had a space dedicated to women entrepreneurs and small business owners. On the wall of that space there was a plaque that read, "This space is dedicated to everyone who's been betrayed and had the courage to speak up. Your pain has meaning. Your truth matters. Never stay silent." The mayor cut the ribbon. Local news covered the opening. And I stood there in my kitchen, flower in my hair and joy in my heart, knowing that I'd created something that would outlast me. I'd built not just a business but a legacy. A legacy of honesty. A legacy of resilience. A legacy of using your pain to help others. My bakery now employed over 40 people. We had regular community events. We donated to nonprofit organizations that helped fraud victims. We partnered with schools to teach financial literacy. We did real work in the community. And it all came from the ashes of betrayal. My book had sold over 1 million copies worldwide. It has been translated into 8 languages. It has helped thousands of people find the courage to report fraud and protect themselves. I'd been featured in magazines and podcasts. I'd been invited to speak at universities and conferences. My story had become part of the cultural conversation about friendship and betrayal and resilience. But more than any of that, I was simply happy. I was happy in my marriage. I was happy with my business. I was happy with my life. And that was worth more than any amount of money or validation. That was the real victory. As I stand here now, 10 years after the day I discovered my empty bank account, I can tell you that I've learned something crucial about life. Betrayal is inevitable. Someone you trust will probably let you down at some point. That's not because you're foolish. It's just part of being human. But you have a choice about what you do with that betrayal. You can let it destroy you, You can let it make you bitter and angry and close off. Or you can let it teach you. You can let it make you stronger. You can let it fuel you to create something better. I chose the second path. I stayed silent and documented. I gathered evidence. I protected myself. I built something real. And I came out the other side whole. I didn't need revenge to win. I just needed to rise higher than the people who tried to break me. I didn't need to scream and cry. I just needed to stay calm and strategic. I didn't need to destroy Violet. She destroyed herself through her own choices. I just made sure the truth was undeniable. Silence, I learned, is the loudest justice of all. When you're completely silent, when you're completely still, when you're completely focused on what you're building, the world will eventually notice. Your success will speak louder than any accusation. Your peace will shine brighter than any anger. Your truth will outlast any lie. I'm Mara Quinn, and I didn't just survive my best friend stealing my life savings. I built something better than what was stolen. I built something real. I built something that matters. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all. If my story has touched you, if you've been through something similar, please know this: your pain has meaning. Your truth matters. Never stay silent. Document everything. Trust yourself. And build something so beautiful that nothing, and no one, can ever take it away from you. Because the life you deserve isn't something someone else gets to decide. It's something you create with your own hands and your own heart, and your own unwavering determination. And that life, my friend, is worth fighting for.